Admiral Vox stared at the holographic display, his four eyes blinking rapidly in disbelief. The small exploration vessel he commanded had been mapping the outer systems of Sector 7, a routine mission until the sensors picked up something impossible. "Run the scan again," he ordered, his gray skin paling to almost white. Officer Mick tapped the console with trembling fingers. "Already did it 3 times, sir. The readings are correct." The ship hovered at the edge of the Terran system, focused on a small rocky planet classified as Type 13, the most dangerous designation in the Galactic Council's planetary index. Type 13 worlds were death traps. Crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and unpredictable weather patterns. Most species couldn't survive on such planets for more than a few minutes, even with the best protective gear. Yet the scans showed structures, and movement, and what appeared to be recreational activities. "Magnify Section K7, Vox said, pointing a slender finger at the display. The image zoomed in on a coastal region, where large waves crashed against black sand beaches. Tiny figures moved about, some actually entering the water despite the high acid content that should have dissolved their skin on contact. "Those can't be living beings," Science Officer Lore said, adjusting her breathing apparatus nervously. "Perhaps automated mining equipment." Vox shook his head. "Mining equipment doesn't swim or build what appear to be. Are those relaxation chairs?" The bridge fell silent as the crew tried to process what they were seeing. A Type 13 world with inhabitants not just surviving, but seemingly enjoying themselves. "We need to report this immediately," Vox decided, turning away from the display. "This changes everything we know about habitable worlds." 3 days later, the Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from 27 species argued loudly as the evidence from Vox's mission played on the main screen. "Impossible," shouted Councillor Draz, his feathers ruffling in agitation. "No species can survive such conditions without advanced technology." "The scans show minimal technology," countered Councillor Telv, her tentacles waving for emphasis. "Basic structures, simple vehicles, minimal protective gear." At the center of the chamber, High Councillor Grun called for order, his booming voice finally silencing the room. "The facts are clear," Grun stated, pointing to the display. "We have discovered a species capable of not just surviving, but thriving on a Class 13 world. More disturbing, they appear to visit this planet voluntarily. For enjoyment." A murmur ran through the assembly. "What kind of creatures would vacation in a place that should kill them?" someone asked. "Dangerous ones," another voice answered. Grun raised his hand for silence. "We must learn more before jumping to conclusions. I propose sending a diplomatic team to make first contact." The council chamber erupted again with objections. "Too risky. They could be predatory. If they find our worlds comfortable, they might want to expand." Vox, standing quietly at the back of the chamber, watched the panic spread. He understood their fear. A species that found deadly worlds pleasant would view the Council's comfortable planets as, what? Boring. Too easy, or perfect for conquest. Finally, Grun managed to restore order. "We cannot ignore this discovery. If these beings can survive such conditions, they possess capabilities we don't understand. Better to approach as friends than wait for them to find us." The vote was close, but the decision was made. A diplomatic mission would be assembled, with Admiral Vox leading the way back to the Death World. As the council adjourned, Vox checked the latest data from the continued observation of the planet. The number of visitors to the Death Resort had actually increased, more beings arriving, carrying what appeared to be luggage. What kind of species, he wondered, packs a bag to visit hell? He would soon find out. The diplomatic vessel Peaceful Approach entered the orbit of the Class 13 Death World with extreme caution. On the command deck, Ambassador Plex reviewed the first contact protocols for the 5th time, his thin fingers trembling slightly. "Remember," he told his team, "we show no fear. These beings survive conditions that would kill any of us in minutes. They must be respected. The diplomatic team consisted of 5 members from different Galactic Council species, each chosen for their expertise. Besides Plex, there was Dr. Krill, a xenobiologist, Taz, a security specialist with reinforced exoskeleton armor, Nivi, a linguistics expert, and Gora, a cultural anthropologist. Admiral Vox, who had made the initial discovery, stood nearby in his protective suit. "The main settlement appears to be there," Vox said, pointing to a collection of structures near a beach of black sand. "They call it Death Resort 9, according to the signs we've translated." Plex swallowed hard. "They named it Death Resort." "Yes," Nivi confirmed, "and the number suggests there are at least 8 others." The team fell silent at this terrifying thought. Their shuttle landed at the designated visitors area, a flat space marked with simple symbols. The team triple-checked their protective gear before stepping out into what their instruments reported as a toxic atmosphere with 1.8 times standard gravity. "Movement detected," Taz warned, her defense systems activating. A figure approached them, walking casually across the black sand. It was Bikdal, covered in minimal clothing that exposed much of its skin directly to the deadly environment. It held up a hand in what they hoped was a peaceful gesture. "Welcome to Death Resort 9. The creature called out in a cheerful voice. "I'm Jack, the resort manager. We don't get many visitors with your unique appearance. Are you here for the extreme vacation package or just day passes?" The diplomatic team stared in shock. The creature, Jack, was speaking to them as if they were tourists, not representatives of the most powerful alliance in the known galaxy. "We are a diplomatic mission from the Galactic Council," Plex finally managed to say through his translator. "We seek peaceful contact with your species." Jack looked confused, then laughed. "Oh, you think we live here?" No. This is just a vacation spot. Most of us are from Earth, about 2 systems over." "You, vacationeer?" Dr. Krill asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "Voluntarily." "Of course. Where else can you get acid surfing, high-gravity mountain climbing, and toxic hot springs all in one place?" Jack gestured around proudly. "We've got visitors from all over Earth here. It's very popular with the adventure tourism crowd." As if to illustrate his point, a small group of humans walked past, carrying what appeared to be surfboards headed toward the roiling acid ocean. They'd waved casually at the aliens. "Those conditions would kill any council species in minutes," Taz stated bluntly, her security training making her suspicious. "How do you survive?" Jack shrugged. "We're built pretty tough, I guess. Plus, we have some basic safety gear for the really extreme stuff." "Want a tour?" The mud volcano is about to erupt. It's quite a sight. Ambassador Plex looked at his team's confused faces, then back at the friendly but terrifying human. "A tour would be acceptable," he said carefully. As they followed Jack, they passed more humans enjoying what should have been lethal conditions. Children played in gravity that would crush most alien youngsters. Elderly humans relaxed in chairs near vents, releasing gases that would poison most species. "This is going to complicate the report," Vox whispered to Plex. The ambassador could only nod, watching in horror as a human child dropped an ice cream cone and began to cry, not from the deadly environment, but from the simple disappointment of lost dessert. "What kind of species?" Plex wondered. "Are we dealing with?" Bob Thompson checked his watch and sighed. "Linda, the kids were supposed to be back from the acid falls 20 minutes ago." His wife looked up from her beach chair, lowering her sunglasses. "Relax, Bob. They have their emergency beacons. Besides, Tom is almost 16. He's responsible enough to watch Amy." The Thompson family was 3 days into their week-long stay at Death Resort 9. As a middle management employee at a robotics firm, Bob could only afford 1 real vacation per year, and the family had voted unanimously for an adventure package this time. I know, Bob said, taking a sip from his water bottle. The resort recommended constant hydration in the high-gravity environment. I just worry. Did you see all those aliens that arrived this morning? The staff say there's some kind of diplomatic team. Linda shrugged. Maybe they want to build their own resort. Competition is good for prices. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Tom and Amy, their faces flushed with excitement beneath their lightweight breathing filters. Dad. Mom. The acid falls were amazing. Amy bounced up and down, her special gravity assist shoes absorbing some of the strain. At 12, she had boundless energy even in 1.8 G. We saw a giant acid slug. It was bigger than our car. Tom nodded, showing them pictures on his camera. The guide said they're rare. We got lucky. Bob smiled, his worry fading. That's great, kids. Now who's hungry? The restaurant is serving Earth-style burgers today. As the family walked toward the resort center, they noticed a group of strange-looking aliens following them at a distance. One of them, taller than the others with 4 eyes, seemed particularly interested in their movements. They're staring at us, Tom whispered. Don't be rude, Linda reminded him. They probably don't see many humans where they're from. Ambassador Plex couldn't believe what he was witnessing. The human family moved through the lethal environment with minimal protection, just simple breathing masks and reinforced footwear. The smaller ones, juveniles, he assumed, showed no signs of distress despite conditions that would kill Plex's own offspring instantly. Are you getting all this, Dr. Krill? He asked the xenobiologist. Every moment, she replied, her scientific equipment recording constantly. Note how the young female actually jumps in the high gravity. Their muscle density must be extraordinary. Jack, the resort manager, approached with a grin. I see you've noticed the Thompson family. Nice folks from Earth. Very typical tourists. Would you like to meet them? Before Plex could respond, Jack was already waving the family over. Bob wasn't sure what to think when the resort manager introduced them to actual aliens. The kids were thrilled, of course. This is Ambassador Plex and his team from the Galactic Council, Jack explained. The alien called Plex extended a thin limb cautiously. Bob remembered his manners and shook it gently. Nice to meet you. I'm Bob Thompson. This is my wife Linda, and our kids Tom and Amy. We're from Earth. Earth, Plex repeated slowly. Your homeworld, is it similar to this environment? Bob laughed. Oh no, Earth is much nicer. Lower gravity, cleaner air. This place is for thrill seekers. We come here for the danger and excitement. Plex's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. You mean, your homeworld is not a Class 13 death planet? Class 13? Tom asked, curious. The alien scientist, introduced as Dr. Krill, explained, our classification system ranges from 1 to 15, with 15 being uninhabitable by any life. Class 13 worlds like this one are considered extreme danger zones. Linda smiled politely. Earth would probably be much lower on your scale then. It's quite pleasant. Actually, Dr. Krill said, checking her data, based on our standards, Earth would be approximately Class 11. The Thompson family exchanged surprised looks. Class 11, Amy asked. But Earth is so boring and safe compared to here. Ambassador Plex looked like he might faint. A species that found a Class 11 world boring and vacationed on Class 13 worlds for fun was beyond his comprehension. Perhaps, he said weakly, we could continue this cultural exchange over a meal. Bob grinned. Great idea. They make amazing burgers here. Do you eat meat? The diplomatic team's collective look of horror was answer enough. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within days of the diplomatic team's first report, every major species knew about the humans, the bizarre creatures who vacationed on death worlds for entertainment. On the Galactic Council's Central Space Station, an emergency session had been called. Representatives from over 50 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices creating a storm of noise despite the translation systems. Order. I demand order. High Counselor Grun shouted, pounding his ceremonial staff against the floor. The room gradually quieted. We will address this situation methodically. Ambassador Plex stood on the central platform, still looking shaken from his experience. Behind him, Dr. Krill displayed holographic images of humans engaging in various recreational activities on the Death World. As you can see, Plex explained, gesturing to an image of Bob Thompson grilling burgers in 1.8 G, while toxic gases swirled nearby. They require minimal protection in environments that would kill most of us instantly. A representative from the Zik Collective, an insectoid species, buzzed angrily. Are we certain they are not a warrior species preparing for invasion? Any being comfortable in such conditions would find our worlds easy to conquer. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Dr. Krill stepped forward. We found no evidence of military intent. Their technology is moderate. They haven't even developed efficient interstellar travel yet. Then how did they reach the Death World? Asked the skeptical representative. They purchased passage on merchant vessels, Plex explained. Apparently, humans are scattered throughout this sector as traders, workers, and tourists. We simply never recognized them as a unified species until now. On Death Resort 9, Jack was having the best business week in the resort's history. News of the alien diplomats had spread across human networks, and tourists were flocking to the resort hoping for a glimpse of real extraterrestrials. We're fully booked for the next 6 months, he told his staff during their morning meeting. And the marketing team has already created a new package, Authentic Alien Encounter Experience. One of the staff raised a hand. Is that ethical? The diplomats aren't tourist attractions. Jack shrugged. They're studying us. We're studying them. Seems fair to me. Besides, they agreed to limited interaction sessions in exchange for our cooperation with their research. Outside the meeting room window, a shuttle landed at the visitor pad. This one was larger than the diplomatic vessel and bore official Galactic Council military markings. Jack sighed. And here comes more company. Looks like the big guns have arrived. Admiral Vox had returned with a military assessment team. After the initial diplomatic contact proved the humans were not immediately hostile, the Council had authorized a more thorough evaluation of their capabilities. Remember, Vox briefed his team as they prepared to disembark. Observe only. No provocative actions. His second-in-command, Commander Rix, checked the readings on his suit. Sir, are we certain these protective measures are adequate? The human children run around in almost nothing. That's precisely why we're here, Vox replied grimly. A species whose children play in conditions that kill our soldiers deserves careful study. As they stepped onto the black sand, they were greeted not by the diplomatic team, but by a crowd of humans holding image-capturing devices and waving excitedly. Look, more aliens. Hey, the tall one has 4 eyes. Can I get a picture with you? Vox froze, his military training suddenly inadequate for dealing with enthusiastic tourists treating his elite assessment team like exotic pets. A human child, he recognized her as Amy Thompson from the reports, pushed through the crowd and stood directly in front of him, looking up with bright, curious eyes. Do you want to see the acid slug colony? She asked cheerfully. They're really cool, and I know a shortcut. Commander Rix looked at Admiral Vox questioningly. We are here to learn, Vox said after a moment's hesitation. Lead the way, small human. As Amy Thompson happily guided the military team toward certain death, by their standards, Vox made a mental note. Humans were not just physically resilient. They were mentally unfathomable. This is what humans call relaxation. Ambassador Plex asked, his voice strained as he reclined in a beach chair. Despite his high-tech environmental suit, he felt the crushing gravity pushing down on every part of his body. Next to him, Bob Thompson sipped a colorful drink through a straw. Yep, nothing like sitting back and enjoying the view after a morning hike. Plex couldn't imagine how their earlier 5-mile trek through corrosive terrain could be considered enjoyable. His protective boots had been damaged, and one of his team members had to be evacuated when their suit developed a tiny leak. The Galactic Council had ordered a formal cultural exchange program after the initial reports. Now, a week later, Death Resort 9 had become an impromptu diplomatic hub, with representatives from 12 species attempting to understand humans through shared activities. "Perhaps you would like to try one of our relaxation methods," Plex offered, hoping to find common ground. "Sure thing," Bob agreed easily. "What do you folks do for fun?" In the resort's main lounge, now designated as the Interspecies Cultural Center, Linda Thompson watched in amusement as Dr. Krill attempted to teach a group of humans the art of sensory suspension, apparently the alien equivalent of meditation. "Focus on nothingness," Dr. Krill instructed, her eyes closed. "In proper gravity, with proper atmosphere, the mind can detach from physical concerns." The humans tried their best, but after 5 minutes, most were fidgeting or checking their phones. Tom was openly doodling. "Sorry," Linda apologized when the session ended in failure. "Humans aren't very good at sitting still." "Fascinating," Dr. Krill noted in her recorder. "Physical challenge appears necessary for human contentment. Comfortable environments create restlessness." Outside on the toxic beach, Admiral Vox watched in horror as Amy Thompson built a sandcastle using the caustic black sand with only thin gloves for protection. "Doesn't that burn?" he asked through his translator. Amy looked up, smiling. "A little tingly. Mom says that's just the minerals. Want to help? You can use my spare shovel." Vox hesitated, then carefully lowered himself to the ground, his reinforced suit creaking under the strain. Following Amy's instructions, he began piling the deadly sand into primitive shapes. "Good job," Amy praised. "You're a natural castle builder." For some reason, Vox felt an unexpected warmth at this small human's approval. It was oddly satisfying to create something purely decorative in such a hostile environment. "On my world," he told her, "we would never touch the ground materials without extensive testing." Amy nodded seriously. "Dad says your worlds are super safe. That must be nice, but kind of boring too." The resort's dining hall had become the center of the most extreme cultural exchange. Jack had organized a taste testing event, with strict safety protocols for all involved. Commander Rick stared at the brown liquid in the tiny cup before him. "And humans consume this, voluntarily, daily." "It's coffee," Jack explained. "Most humans drink it every morning. It's perfectly safe for us. Well, mostly safe. Too much can make you jittery." The aliens watched in collective shock as Bob casually downed a full cup of what their scanners identified as a potent neurotoxin. "Ah," Bob sighed contentedly. "Now that's a good brew." The video of this moment, captured by Tom on his phone, would later go viral across both human and alien networks, titled "Alien Minds Blown by Human Drinking Literal Poison for Breakfast." As the day ended, the Thompson family and the diplomatic team gathered on the observation deck to watch the resort's famous acid rainstorm, which created spectacular light patterns in the toxic atmosphere. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Linda said, standing comfortably in the open air with just a thin rain poncho. Ambassador Plex, sealed in his environmental chamber, could only nod in bewildered agreement. The sight was indeed beautiful, but nowhere near as astonishing as watching humans treat deadly planetary conditions as a backdrop for family bonding. "Your species," he told the Thompsons, "defies all logical classification." Bob laughed. "Wait until you see what we do for winter sports back on Earth. Ever heard of something called skiing?" The weather monitoring systems at Death Resort 9 began blaring warnings 3 days earlier than predicted. Jack rushed into the control room, his face grave as he studied the displays. "How bad?" he asked the chief meteorologist. "Category 7 megastorm," she replied, pointing to the swirling mass on the screen. "Acid content triple the usual levels, wind speeds exceeding safety parameters. And it's moving fast. We have less than 8 hours." Jack didn't hesitate. "Initiate emergency protocols. Full evacuation." Within minutes, resort staff activated the alarm system. Red lights flashed throughout the complex as the announcement echoed. Attention all guests. This is not a drill. A Category 7 megastorm has been detected approaching Death Resort 9. All guests must prepare for immediate evacuation. Please report to your designated assembly points. In the Thompson family's cabin, the alarm caught them in the middle of packing for a day trip. That doesn't sound good, Linda said, looking at the flashing red light. Bob checked the resort app on his phone. Category 7 storm. That's beyond what the resort is rated for. The kids looked disappointed but not particularly frightened. After 3 years of adventure vacations, the Thompson family was accustomed to occasional evacuations. So much for seeing the fire geysers, Tom grumbled, putting away his camera. As they headed toward their assembly point, they noticed the alien diplomatic team and military assessment group rushing through the corridors in obvious panic, their environmental suits sealed at maximum protection. They look scared, Amy observed. Their safety margins are much lower than ours, Bob explained. What's dangerous for us is catastrophic for them. Admiral Vox struggled to maintain order as his team rushed to prepare their ship for emergency departure. The news of the approaching storm had caused near panic among the alien representatives. Our vessels were not designed for these conditions, Commander Rix reported. If we don't leave in the next 2 hours, we risk being grounded by the atmospheric disturbance. Ambassador Plex hurried over, his environmental suit's status lights flashing amber. The diplomatic vessel is prepared, but we're having trouble accounting for all personnel. 3 research teams are still out in the field collecting samples. Vox's 4 eyes blinked in alarm. The storm will hit their location first. They won't survive. A human voice interrupted their conversation. Excuse me, did you say you have people stranded out there? Vox turned to find Bob Thompson standing behind him, with his family nearby. Yes, Vox admitted. 3 research teams in the eastern canyons. Our rescue vehicles cannot reach them in time due to the terrain. The Thompsons exchanged looks, having a silent family conversation. Then Bob nodded. We can help, he said. Our rental vehicles are designed for the rough terrain, and we know those canyons from our hiking yesterday. Absolutely not, Vox responded immediately. The conditions are deteriorating rapidly. It would be suicide even for humans. With respect, Admiral, Bob said firmly, we've been through worse on our adventure trips. Besides, no one gets left behind. That's a human rule. Before Vox could argue further, Jack the resort manager joined them, leading a group of resort staff and several other human tourists. We've organized volunteer rescue teams, Jack announced. The Thompsons can take the eastern route. My team will cover the north. We have emergency shelters if we can't make it back in time. Within 20 minutes, the human rescue teams departed in their reinforced terrain vehicles. The alien officials watched in stunned silence as the humans drove straight toward the approaching storm that threatened to melt the protective coatings on their environmental suits. Ambassador Plex stood beside Admiral Vox at the observation window. They're risking their lives for people they've only just met, he said quietly. Perhaps, Vox replied. We have misunderstood humans entirely. We saw their physical resilience and assumed they must be dangerous. And instead, Vox watched the vehicles disappear into the swirling toxic clouds. Instead, we find that their greatest strength may be something else entirely. Around them, the resort trembled as the first powerful winds struck the outer barriers. The evacuation continued, but all eyes kept turning to the eastern horizon, where humans had voluntarily entered conditions that no sane species would face. 1 month after the megastorm, the Galactic Council chamber was unusually quiet as High Counselor Grun called the special session to order. The agenda had only one item, the human question. Before we begin formal proceedings, Grun announced, I invite Admiral Vox to present his final report on the events at Death Resort 9. Admiral Vox stood, looking different from the last time he had addressed the council. His posture was more relaxed, and he wore a small pin on his uniform, a black beach symbol from the resort. "Esteemed council members," he began, "my report on humans is now complete, but it differs greatly from what I initially expected to deliver." The chamber screens activated, showing images from the crisis. The storm had been worse than predicted, with winds that tore through the resort's outer structures and acid rain that melted sensor arrays. But the focus was on the humans, ordinary tourists, and staff who had driven into the deadly conditions without hesitation. "All alien research teams were rescued," Vox continued. "Moreover, when the storm damaged Commander Rix's shuttle, trapping him and 2 junior officers under debris, it was these humans who extracted them." The screen showed Tom and Amy Thompson working together to lift a twisted metal beam, while toxic rain poured down on their minimal protective gear. "The children," a council member gasped. "They rescued trained military personnel." "Yes," Vox confirmed. "And they suffered minor acid burns doing so, yet continued the rescue without complaint." In a smaller chamber nearby, the Thompson family waited nervously in their formal Earth clothes. They had been invited to the Galactic Council as special guests, an unprecedented honor for a non-member species. "Stop fidgeting, Tom," Linda whispered, straightening her son's tie. "I can't help it," Tom complained. "This collar is worse than the acid rain." Bob checked his watch. "It should be starting soon. Remember, just be yourselves." Amy looked around at the alien architecture. "Do you think they'll let us visit their planets? Jack says most of them are like giant resorts compared to Death Resort 9. "We'll see, honey," Linda said. "This is all new territory." Back in the council chamber, Dr. Krill presented her scientific findings. "Humans evolved on a Class 11 world with variable conditions, multiple predators, and constant environmental changes," she explained. "Their adaptation was not just physical durability, but remarkable behavioral flexibility." She displayed a chart comparing human physiological responses to those of council species. "They seek challenges," she continued. "Comfort actually causes them distress over time. What we consider survival situations, they consider recreation." Ambassador Plex took the floor next. "Based on these findings, I propose a revised classification system that accounts for what we now call the human factor. Additionally, I recommend Earth be granted observer status in the Council, with potential for full membership." This caused murmurs throughout the chamber. Never had a species been fast-tracked so quickly. High Counselor Grun called for order. "We will now vote on the recommendations." The vote passed with an overwhelming majority. When the Thompson family was escorted into the chamber, they were met with something they never expected: applause from dozens of alien species. High Counselor Grun addressed them directly. "The Thompson family, we honor your bravery during the crisis at Death Resort 9. Your actions have changed how we view your entire species." Bob stepped forward awkwardly. "We just did what anyone would do. Nobody gets left behind." "A simple principle," Grun noted, "but a profound one. Today, we established the first human galactic cooperative initiative. Death Resort 9 will be rebuilt as an official diplomatic zone, and humans will be invited to assist with worlds previously considered uninhabitable." The formal ceremony concluded with the presentation of official medals and the signing of preliminary agreements. As the family prepared to return to Earth, Ambassador Plex approached them privately. "You have changed everything," he told them. "The galaxy feared creatures who could survive death worlds. Now we welcome allies who can help us thrive in places we never dreamed possible." Amy looked up at the four-eyed diplomat who now seemed more like a friend. "Will you visit Earth sometime? We have this thing called winter where frozen water falls from the sky. It's super fun." Plex's expression was unreadable behind his breathing apparatus, but his voice held a note of what might have been amusement. "Perhaps I will, young human. Perhaps I will."